I returned from Singapore 10 days early, and the doorman looked at me as though I was already too late. Mr. O, is everything all right?
You're back early, Mrs. Kang.
I have a key. Joon-ho gave it to me. You gave her a key?
Amara Ford returned from Singapore 10 days early and found the woman her husband's family had once chosen for him holding a permanent-looking key to her penthouse. By the end of the week, that woman would try to forge her way into the home and discover that the black wife everyone treated like an outsider secretly owned the door. The reign over the city had the kind of hush that made even car horns sound apologetic, and Amara Ford let herself feel, for exactly the length of the elevator ride up from the parking garage, that she was almost home. 10 days in Singapore. 4 building sites, 2 contract disputes, 1 system that kept failing its own biometric handshake at 3A. Local time, no matter how many times she rewrote the protocol. She had missed the smell of Solstice Tower's lobby cedar and cold marble more than she'd admit to anyone who wasn't her. She thought, in the elevator up from the garage, about the first year of this marriage, how Joon-ho used to meet her flights himself instead of sending a driver, standing at arrivals in a charcoal suit with a coffee he already knew she would want more than flowers. That version of him had told her things before she had to ask. Somewhere between becoming the youngest man ever trusted to chair the Kang Family Council and inheriting its legitimate hotels, shipping companies, private security contracts, and quieter networks no annual report ever named, he had changed. He had learned to manage every room before it could surprise him, his father, his uncles, rival families, officials who became careful when the Kang name was spoken. Lately, he had begun managing Amara the same way. She had not married the feared head of the Kang organization because she believed he was harmless. She had married him because, with her, he had once been honest. She rolled her suitcase past the fountain, past the 2 junior concierges who greeted her with the easy familiarity of people who'd watched her argue with contractors in 4 languages, and toward the man who had run this lobby for as long as she'd lived above it. Mr. O, she smiled. Tell me nothing broke while I was gone. Mr. O did not smile back. It was such a small thing, at first. The pause before he answered. The way his eyes went, just briefly, to the tablet on his podium instead of to her face. 20 years he had greeted residents of this building, and in the 3 years Amara had lived in it, she had never once seen Mr. O look for permission before he spoke to her. Mrs. Kang. He used her married name, which he almost never did. He'd called her Amara since the wedding, at her own insistence. You're back early. Red Eye landed at 5. She held up her badge out of habit, though the door had already unlocked itself the moment her face crossed the scanner, her own system, doing exactly what she'd built it to do. Everything all right? He didn't answer right away. And that, more than anything, was the thing that stayed with her in the elevator, not an accusation, not a confession, just a good man's face trying to decide how much silence was still kindness. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Kang, he said finally, and looked back down at his tablet. The elevator doors closed on her reflection before she could read anything else in his face. She told herself, the way she told junior engineers when a sensor threw an error that didn't match any known fault, don't diagnose before you have data. But 3 years of marriage had taught her that Mr. O's silencers were the most reliable alarm system in the building, and this one had just gone off. The private lift opened onto the residence floor, where the air smelled like her husband's cologne and beneath it, something floral and expensive that was not hers. 2 of Joon-ho's security men stood near the far wall, dark suits, immaculate, eyes lowered in the careful way men lowered their eyes when they had already seen too much. Neither warned her. The door recognized Amara. Of course it did. She had built it too. It clicked open beneath her palm, and the first thing she saw was a woman's coat over the chair that had belonged to her grandmother. The second was Joon-ho, standing in the living room in his shirt sleeves, his expression briefly stripped of the control that made port bosses and council elders wait for him to speak first. You're early, he said, as if that were the breach. Behind him, Yoo De-yoon held a glass of wine in Amara's kitchen. She was the daughter Chairman Kang had once selected for Joon-ho, before he had rejected the arrangement and married Amara instead. Dayoon looked less like a visitor than a woman rehearsing a life she believed had been delayed. "I have a key," she said, lifting a brushed titanium card engraved with the solstice crest. Joon-ho gave it to me. Amara did not raise her voice. She had spent enough time around powerful men to know that volume was often what people used when authority had failed them. "You gave her a key." "For one dinner," Joon-ho said. "3 overseas partners were here to discuss the U shipping alliance. My father wanted the Penthouse presented as a family residence. Dayoon was asked to host because you were in Singapore." "Asked by whom?" His silence answered before he did. "My father. And you agreed to let the woman your family once chose for you play hostess in my home. It was optics, nothing more. Optics are what powerful people call a lie when they want everyone else to cooperate with it." Dayoon set down her wine glass with a deliberate click. The delegates needed to see that the 2 families could operate as one household. Amara looked at her. "Then your father should have offered them his household." Dayoon's composure tightened. "I should go," she said. "Joon-ho, call me when you've settled this." She let herself out through the door Amara had designed, using the key Amara's husband had placed in her hand. Neither Amara nor Joon-ho moved until the private elevator swallowed the sound of her heels. What followed was not a fight. Amara almost wished it had been. Instead, Joon-ho spent 20 minutes explaining the port alliance, the council pressure, and the 3 foreign partners whose cooperation could stabilize half the Kang network. He promised the credential would expire by morning. He did not once ask what it had cost her to see another woman wearing the role of wife in the home Amara had built around their marriage. Amara had designed Solstice Tower's entire security architecture 2 years before she met Kang Joon-ho. She had won the contract against firms twice her size and spent months mapping every service entrance, lift, override, credential tier, and emergency failsafe. Solstice was one of the few Kang properties where a family name could not substitute for verified consent. She met Joon-ho during the final walkthrough. The owner's son had arrived without an entourage, though the building manager went pale when he recognized him. Joon-ho asked sharper questions about her protections than anyone else had asked in 6 months. He wanted to know whether a council elder, a police chief, or even the building owner could pressure staff into bypassing the system. "Not without leaving evidence," Amara had told him. He had smiled then. "Good. Charm is only useful when systems are weak." She had mistaken that answer for a promise about the man himself. By Monday, the story had traveled through Solstice Tower without anyone admitting to carrying it. The concierge staff became excessively formal. A neighbor asked whether everything was settled upstairs. At Amara's firm, Marcus lingered after the Tuesday briefing. "Someone saw Yoo Dayoon leaving your residence floor," he said. "They said she looked very comfortable. I thought you should hear it before a client decides to be helpful." "I would rather have heard it from my husband," Amara said, "but thank you. The rumor did not tell her anything new. It told her something worse." Other people already understood the symbolism Joon-ho kept pretending did not exist. In his world, a former arranged bride hosting syndicate partners inside the boss's private residence was not a harmless dinner. It was a public signal, and powerful families survived by reading signals before anyone dared explain them. Amara Ford had built her professional reputation on being the person who noticed the anomaly nobody else caught the badge swipe at 2 a.m. That didn't belong. The vendor contract with the clause buried on page 40. She had never once expected to need those skills inside her own marriage. But she found herself, that week, doing what she always did when something didn't add up. She stopped waiting to be told the truth and started looking for it herself. 3 days after the key, Joon-ho asked Amara to attend dinner with his father and the family council. The invitation alone told her the matter was larger than he had admitted. The Kang Council did not gather merely to discuss hotels and shipping rates. It decided which captains received protection, which disputes disappeared before reaching court, and which families were allowed to operate through Kang-controlled ports without interference. She went because absence would be interpreted as weakness, and she was finished letting other people translate her silence. Chairman Kang received her with perfect formality and no warmth. He had never forgiven Joon-ho for rejecting the marriage arrangement with the Yu family, whose port routes would complete the Kang network along the southern coast. Over the second course, Joon-ho's uncle praised Dayoon's natural place at the Penthouse dinner. The overseas partners appreciated seeing continuity between the households, he said. It reassured them that old misunderstandings would not obstruct the alliance. old misunderstandings. That was what the family called Amara's marriage when they wanted to pretend it could still be edited. She placed one hand on Joon-ho's knee beneath the table and gave him a single chance to correct the room. He could say the key had been a mistake. He could say his wife was not a temporary obstacle to an alliance arranged before he met her. He could say their home would never again be used as a stage for his father's ambitions. The room waited. The U alliance remains strategically important, Joon-ho said. I appreciate everyone's patience while the final terms are reviewed. He had protected the council from discomfort and left his wife standing alone inside the meaning of his silence. In the car afterward, she asked him directly, "Why didn't you say it? One sentence, Joon-ho. That's all I needed. You don't understand what my father would have made of it. I understand exactly what he made of your silence. I am handling this. You are hiding from it," she said, and calling it handling. He didn't answer that either, and something in Amara, not anger, something colder and more useful than anger settled into place. If her husband would not tell her the truth about what was happening inside his own family, she would find it herself, the way she found every other anomaly that mattered. In the data, nobody thought to check. If you believe access to a woman's home must be earned, not assumed, write IOAN-THEKEY in the comments. Back at the apartment, Amara placed an empty suitcase at the foot of the closet. She did not pack it. She did not put it away. Leaving before she knew the full truth would still mean reacting to information Joon-ho controlled. She wanted the facts first and the decision second, both on her terms. That night, after Joon-ho fell into the restless sleep of a man who believed the problem was managed, Amara opened her laptop at the kitchen island and logged into the one system in this marriage that had never once lied to her. The access ledger of Solstice Tower's security network, the one she had designed, coded, and installed with her own hands 3 years before she'd ever heard the name Kang. The next morning, Amara called Priya, her business partner, and the only person who had watched her build Solstice's architecture from raw blueprints. "Pull the logs," Priya said after hearing about the key and the council dinner. "You built a system that cannot be pressured by a surname. Stop letting your marriage pressure you into ignoring it. It feels different when it is my house. Then be the engineer and the owner at the same time. You are allowed to be both." Amara had spent a week waiting for truth to be offered as an act of love. Priya reminded her that truth could also be retrieved as evidence. The ledger told her, in the clean, indifferent language of timestamps and access codes, more than her husband ever had. Thursday, 6:52 p.m. Yoo Da-yoon's temporary credential activated by Kang Joon-ho, guest tier, 48-hour expiration, exactly as he'd promised. That much matched his story. Friday, 11:14 a.m. A request logged from the building management office to convert guest credential KJH0091 to permanent resident tier. Amara read that line 4 times. A temporary key for one dinner did not request an upgrade to permanent resident status on its own. Someone had gone to the building office, in person, and asked for exactly that, someone who wanted a great deal more than one evening's hospitality. The request had been denied. Not by Mr. O, and not by any human hand at all, by the system itself, automatically, the instant it hit a verification layer. Amara did not remember writing. Restricted. Unit 4501 title holder authorization required. Escalation logged to root administrator. She sat with that sentence longer than she'd sat with anything all week. She had created that failsafe after an earlier client lost control of his residence because a confident visitor persuaded frightened staff to treat influence as authorization. Solstice's system did not care who someone's father was, which council feared their surname, or how expensive their clothes looked. Permanent access belonged to the title holder alone. As far as Amara knew, that title holder had never been her. She checked the unit's title registration the way she'd checked 1,000 client properties before. It took her 4 tries to be sure she was reading it correctly. Unit 4501, Solstice Tower. Title holder of record, Amara Ford Kang. Filing date, 14 months prior, 6 weeks after her wedding. She had not filed that. She had not signed anything to file that. And her husband, who reviewed every contract that touched his family's name before it reached a notary, had apparently signed something that quietly, legally, made his wife the sole owner of the home he'd just handed a key to another woman for. He had never told her. She kept scrolling anyway, the way she always did when a single anomaly turned up in a system, because in her experience, anomalies rarely traveled alone. The guest credentials access log showed more than the one Thursday dinner Joon-ho had described. 2 entries on Wednesday, both under 2 minutes, both at the service entrance rather than the main lobby, the kind of brief, deliberate visit someone makes when they want to know how a space works before they're seen using it properly. A 3rd entry Thursday afternoon, hours before the dinner, Joon-ho claimed the key was 4, time-stamped to the exact minute the building's cleaning staff would have finished the penthouse and left it empty. None of it was proof of anything Amara could put a name to yet. But it told her that whatever Joon-ho believed he'd authorized one evening, one purpose, one narrow window Dayun had already treated as an invitation to learn the apartment on her own terms, well before anyone else knew she'd been inside it at all. It was, Amara thought, exactly the kind of pattern she'd flag in a client audit without hesitation. Not a single mistake, but a woman testing the edges of a door someone else had left open a crack. She began with the one person in this family who had never once lied to her, mostly because he'd never once explained anything to her at all, Mr. Oh. She found him on his afternoon break, in the narrow staff room behind the lobby, and asked him the one question she should have asked 3 days earlier. "What did she say to you, Mr. O, the day I came home?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "She came to the desk Friday morning," he said carefully. "Asked me to process a permanent card. Said Mr. Kang had authorized it verbally and would confirm later." He turned his coffee cup a slow quarter turn, not quite looking at her. "I told her I could not issue a permanent credential without title holder authorization. She did not like that answer. What did she do? She reminded me that the Kang organization controls the company that holds this building's management contract." His jaw tightened. "She said men who obstruct family business do not remain in trusted positions. I did not process the card, Mrs. Kang. But I spent the weekend wondering whether refusing her had cost me the work I have done for 20 years. And when I came home Monday, I did not know what to say to you," he said simply. "I did not know whose wife you still were." There it was, the thing his face had been holding back in the lobby, the thing that had nothing to do with judgment and everything to do with a good man caught between 2 versions of loyalty, neither of which he'd been given enough information to navigate. "Thank you for telling me," Amara said, and meant it more than she'd meant almost anything that week. She left the staff room with 2 facts that had not existed for her that morning. Her husband had signed the transfer that allowed his grandmother to make Amara the legal owner of their home and had never told her. And the woman he'd given a key to had tried, in the same week, to take far more than 1 dinner's worth of access and had been willing to threaten an innocent man's livelihood to get it. She did not go to Joon-ho first. She went to the one member of his family who had never once needed him in the room to speak plainly to her, his grandmother. Kang So-yeon received her in the small sitting room she kept separate from the family's formal reception halls, poured tea without being asked, and listened to Amara's question, "Did you have the penthouse retitled in my name? And why was I never told?" with the unhurried patience of a woman who had clearly been expecting this conversation for over a year. "I had the deed transferred myself," So-yeon said, 6 weeks after your wedding. "It is an old custom in this family, older than my husband's grandfather. When a woman marries into the Kang name, something permanent is placed in her hands alone, something that cannot be undone by a husband's temper, a father's disapproval, or a mistress's ambition. My own mother-in-law did the same for me, in her own way, in a country that gave women far less protection than a deed. Why wasn't I told?" So-yeon's eyes were kind, but they did not soften the answer. "Because my grandson asked me not to tell you. He signed the transfer understanding exactly what it meant, that if the marriage failed through any fault of his, you would keep this home regardless of what his father wished. And then he asked me never to mention it, because he did not want you to know that the people who love him best do not entirely trust him to keep his own promises." She studied Amara for a long moment. "My grandson has never once been afraid of losing a business deal in his life. He has been terrified, for 3 years, of you discovering that his own family thinks he needs to be protected against." Something in Amara's chest braced for a different kind of blow entirely, cracked open in a direction she hadn't anticipated. She had spent a week building a case against her husband's silence, assuming it was born of indifference. It had never occurred to her that it might be born of shame. It did not undo what Joon-ho had done. Shame explained his secrecy. It did not excuse it. But it changed the question Amara had to answer. She was no longer deciding whether she had married a man incapable of respecting her. She was deciding whether a man powerful enough to frighten entire rooms could learn to stop hiding from the one person whose judgment mattered to him most. She thanked So-yeon for the tea and for the truth and went home to wait for her husband with a folder of printouts he did not yet know existed. While Amara gathered evidence, Yoo Da-yoon watched her father's shipping company lose another insurance line and 2 more port contracts. The Yoo family had roots the Kangs wanted, but without Kang protection and financing, those roots were becoming liabilities. The alliance was no longer expansion. It was survival. Chairman Yoo did not ask whether his daughter still wanted the marriage arrangement that had been discussed years earlier. He had never treated her preference as relevant. "You hosted Kang partners in Joon-ho's residence," he said over dinner. "The photographs are already circulating, yet the tower still lists you as a temporary guest. Because he is married, father. Marriages end. Public expectations begin before paperwork does. Your task was to make the alliance appear inevitable. A permanent household credential would tell every uncertain captain and lender that the Yoo family is already inside the Kang circle. Amara owns the system. Then prove you are more useful than the woman who built it." Da-yoon stared at him. "And if I refuse?" Chairman Yoo continued eating. "Then I will tell the board that my daughter cannot complete the only duty for which she has been prepared since childhood, and I will find another instrument. Instrument, not daughter." Da-yoon left with the knowledge that her father would sacrifice her whether she succeeded or failed. Success would merely let her choose the room in which it happened. She had spent her life learning that value meant becoming permanent on a contract, in a photograph, behind a locked door. She decided she would not remain temporary. She was waiting at the kitchen island when Joon-ho came home, the same island where she'd first opened the ledger that told her more truth in one evening than her marriage had in 1 week. She did not raise her voice. She had decided, driving home from So-yeon's, that this conversation deserved better than the one they'd had in the car after his family's dinner. "I know about the deed," she said, before he'd even set down his keys. He went very still. She watched him decide, in real time, whether to lie, and watched him decide against it, the first honest reflex she'd seen from him all week. "My grandmother told you." "My grandmother told me," Amara said, letting the correction sit between them. "You have been married to me for 3 years, Joon-ho. She has known you for 37. At some point, I would like you to introduce me to the parts of your family that trust me enough to tell me the truth. It's not about trust. It is entirely about trust. You let your family put my name on that deed because some part of them believed you needed a check on your own behavior. And instead of telling me that, so we could deal with it together, you asked your grandmother to keep it a secret because you would rather I think you're perfect than let me see you're afraid." He didn't answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice had none of the polished calm he used on his father, on business partners, on rooms full of people he needed to manage. "I have spent my whole life being the son who does not fail," he said. "Not once. Not in school, not in the business, not in the family council. The one thing I have never had to defend is my judgment. And then I married you, against everything my father wanted. And the first thing my own grandmother did was make sure you'd survive it if I turned out to be exactly the kind of man my father always assumed I'd become." His jaw worked. "I did not want you to see that anyone in this family thought that little of me. Not even her. So instead you let me find out from a locked file in my own security system," Amara said, "and from a woman drinking wine in my living room with a key you gave her rather than have one difficult conversation with me." "That's not." He stopped. Started again, quieter. "You're right. There is no version of this where giving her that key was the right decision. I told myself it was 36 hours, a business necessity, nothing that would matter once the merger closed. I did not let myself think about what it would look like from where you were standing, because if I thought about that, I would have had to admit I was choosing my father's comfort over yours, and I did not want to be a man who does that." "You are a man who did that," Amara said, not unkindly, but without give either. "The question now is whether you're willing to be a different one." He looked at her for a long moment, really looked, the way he used to before board meetings and family obligations had trained him to keep his face composed at all times, and said the only thing that had any chance of mattering, "Tell me what that costs me. I'll pay it." She did not answer him right away. Some debts, she'd learned in her own line of work, could not be settled in a single transaction. But for the first time since the wine glass and the key, she believed he understood what the debt was. Across the city, Da-yoon made one final attempt to turn temporary access into a permanent fact. Solstice Tower allowed a resident credential to be upgraded only when the title holder approved a co-occupancy declaration through biometric confirmation. But Da-yoon knew the Kang organization maintained an off-site security administration center for emergencies involving protected residents. She also knew one-night supervisor owed Chairman Yu a favor. She prepared a forged co-occupancy form bearing Amara's copied signature, attached a fabricated authorization from Joon-ho's office, and added a letter claiming that public disclosure of her residency would create a security risk. It was the kind of document designed to make an ordinary employee fear the consequences of asking questions. Friday night, the Kang Foundation ballroom filled with judges, shipping executives, council allies, and men whose legitimate titles explained only part of their influence. Amara wore a deep burgundy gown and refused to let anyone studying her marriage see uncertainty on her face. Joon-ho stood beneath the foundation crest, delivering a speech about loyalty when her phone vibrated with the emergency pattern she had assigned to one category of breach: permanent resident escalation. Unit 4501. Biometric consent mismatch. Root administrator review required. Amara read the alert twice. An image of the submitted declaration appeared beneath it. Her name had been signed by someone who shaped the A too carefully. The system had told her immediately what her husband had taken a week to admit. Someone was trying to convert performance into possession. She left the ballroom without interrupting Joon-ho's speech. In the car, she changed into the flats she kept beneath the passenger seat and followed the live audit trail toward the Kang Security Administration Center. The building was technically owned by a private risk management company. Everyone in the city knew whose orders it obeyed. The guards recognized Amara, but still scanned her credentials. That small act of procedure steadied her. At least one part of the Kang Empire still understood that recognition was not consent. Da-yoon was inside the control room, standing over a frightened night supervisor who had reached the final approval screen but could not force the system past Amara's biometric lock. "Authorize it manually," Da-yoon said. "Chairman Yu will confirm everything in the morning." "He cannot confirm access to my home," Amara said from the doorway. Da-yoon turned. For 1 second, the woman who had carried Amara's key like a victory looked exactly as trapped as the supervisor beside her. "This is a protected family matter," Da-yoon said. "It became my matter when you forged my signature." Amara placed her tablet on the console and opened the original deed, the title holder credential, and the audit trail documenting both escalation attempts. "Cancel the request. Preserve every camera recording and lock the submitted documents against deletion," she told the supervisor. The man looked at Da-yoon, then at the Kang seal on the false authorization. "Do it," Amara said. "I am the title holder and the root administrator. No family name outranks those two facts inside this system." The supervisor cancelled the request. Da-yoon's face hardened. "You think owning one apartment makes you stronger than the families behind it?" "No," Amara said. "Building the system that just refused all of you does." Joon-ho arrived 9 minutes later, still in his tuxedo. 4 members of his security detail stopped outside the control room. He entered alone. His eyes moved from Amara to the forged declaration, then to Da-yoon. The room changed around his silence. The night supervisor straightened. Da-yoon's confidence thinned. This was the version of Kang Joon-ho the city knew, not loud, not theatrical, but dangerous, because every person present understood how much could change after one quiet sentence from him. For most of his life, he had used that silence as power. Amara waited to see whether he would hide inside it again. He did not. "You forged my wife's consent to enter her home as a permanent resident," he said. "You threatened a concierge, compromised one of our security employees, and used my office seal to make the fraud look protected by the Kang organization." Da-yoon swallowed. "Your father asked me to prove the alliance was real. My father said the credential would show the council that. My father did not own the door. Your father did not own the door. I did not own the door." He looked at Amara when he said the last sentence. Da-yoon's composure finally broke. "You gave me the first key. You let me host in that home. You stood beside me while those men treated me as the woman who should have married you. Do not pretend you gave me nothing to believe. Joon-ho accepted the accusation without looking away. I gave you a symbol I had no right to give because I was too weak to confront my father. That failure is mine. What you did with it is yours. Amara felt no triumph, only clarity. Your father treated you like an instrument, she told Dae-yoon. Joon-ho treated my home like a negotiating room. Both things were wrong. But you still chose to threaten Mr. Oh, and forge my consent. I will not carry your father's cruelty as an excuse for your decision. Joon-ho removed the Kang signet from his right hand and placed it on the console beside the fraudulent papers, not as a threat, but as evidence that what followed carried his full authority. The U alliance is terminated, he said. Their port access, protection agreement, and emergency credit line will be reviewed by the council tonight. No retaliation against employees. No hidden pressure. The reason will be recorded exactly as it happened. Attempted fraud against the title holder of a Kang residence. Dae-yoon stared at him. Your father will reverse you. Then he can challenge me before the full council and explain why another family's ambition was worth violating my wife's home. I will not make her pay for my silence again. For the first time since Amara returned from Singapore, Joon-ho chose the truth while it was still expensive. Before midnight, the full Kang Council received the preserved audit trail, camera recordings, forged declaration, and Joon-ho's written termination of the alliance. Chairman Yu withdrew his proposal before dawn rather than enter a council chamber where every man present had already seen proof that his family had attempted to manufacture authority it did not possess. The Kang organization suspended the Yu family's preferred access to its ports and private credit network pending an external review. Joon-ho refused every suggestion of unofficial punishment. The record, he said, would be enough. In a world built on trust, documented fraud traveled farther than intimidation ever could. Dae-yoon left the city within the month and joined a cousin's legitimate logistics firm in a smaller port town. Amara later heard that she became competent and fiercely private there. She did not forgive Dae-yoon, but neither did she need the woman destroyed. Distance, accountability, and a life no longer organized around another family's approval were consequence enough. Mr. O received, the following week, a formal note from Kang So-yeon herself, thanking him for his discretion and integrity, the kind of note that, in a family like this one, functioned as more job security than any raise could have. He kept it in the same drawer as his 20-year service pin and told Amara, the next time she passed the concierge desk, that he had never once doubted she'd sort it out. He had only worried what it might cost her to do it alone. You didn't leave me alone with it, Amara told him. You told me the truth the moment I asked. That mattered more than you know. 3 weeks later, Seo-yeon forced the council to address Joon-ho's judgment. Amara attended from a seat no one had formally offered her, and no one dared ask her to surrender. Chairman Kang criticized his son for allowing a household breach to threaten the organization's credibility. He spoke about operational discipline, council exposure, and the danger of giving rival families ambiguous signals. So-yeon let him finish. You are correcting him as a boss, she said. I am correcting him as a husband. I transferred that home to Amara so she would never depend on his honesty to keep a roof over her head. I did not do it so he could decide honesty was optional everywhere else. The room went still. A man who cannot tell his wife the truth before a crisis, So-yeon continued, has no business asking this council to trust his judgment after one. Joon-ho did not defend himself. He accepted a temporary reduction in unilateral authority. Major family agreements affecting his household or Amara's company would require joint disclosure and council review. In the Kang world, where power was guarded more fiercely than money, the concession cost him something real. That mattered to Amara. Not because she wanted him weakened, but because accountability that cost nothing was merely another performance. The story that spread afterward was not that Amara had nearly been replaced. It was that the black woman dismissed as an inconvenient outsider had built the only system in the Kang Empire strong enough to refuse the Kang name itself. 3 family properties requested her firm's services. 2 council allies asked her to audit their private residences. So-yeon told her, over tea, that Amara had protected the family's credibility more effectively in 1 week than most of its men had managed in years. Joon-ho asked her, 3 weeks after the gala, what it would take to earn back the thing he'd spent one careless week nearly losing. Amara had thought about her answer longer than she'd thought about almost any decision in her adult life. Not silence, she told him. Never again silence. I don't need you to be perfect, Joon-ho. I need you to be honest before it becomes a crisis, not after. I need to be someone you tell things to, not someone you protect from things by keeping her in the dark. And if I can do that, then we rebuild, she said, slowly. On terms I set this time, not terms your family assumes for both of us. Joon-ho agreed to full disclosure, on Amara's terms, for every council decision, account, and family arrangement that touched their shared life. He also signed a marital property agreement confirming that her company, patents, and the penthouse remained beyond the reach of the Kang organization, regardless of what happened between them. The weeks that followed were deliberately ordinary. He told her about pressure from his father before it reached the council. He admitted when he was afraid an answer would disappoint her instead of hiding the answer itself. She did not reward him for basic honesty, but she noticed the consistency. When Amara told Priya she had chosen to stay, Priya did not celebrate. You are allowed to leave a system even after it begins working, she said. I know. I am not staying to prove I can repair him. I am staying because he finally accepted that the repair is his responsibility. Priya considered that, then nodded. Then I will hold both of you to the terms. Amara did not move out, and she did not pretend the key had meant nothing. Trust rebuilt after betrayal was not the same as trust that had never broken. What she chose was more deliberate than forgiveness and more honest than staying from habit. I'm not doing this because I'm afraid of losing what we have, she told him. I'm doing it because I watched you finally choose truth over comfort when it actually cost you something with your father, with the council, with me. That's the only version of you I'm willing to build a life with. Not the man who avoids hard conversations. The one who has them, even when they're expensive. And if I fail at that again? Then we'll have a very different conversation, she said. And I will not need your grandmother's deed to tell me what I'm entitled to walk away with. I already know. He did not promise her perfection. She would not have believed him if he had. He promised her, instead, the one thing he had withheld from the very beginning, that whatever came next, easy or difficult, she would hear it from him first. 6 months later, Amara stood at the concierge desk with Mr. O, reviewing a new access protocol for Solstice Towers residents, one that required, for any permanent household credential, both registered occupants' biometric confirmation, no exceptions, no verbal authorizations, no family names substituting for consent. It was a policy she'd written into every contract her firm signed from that point forward, and one Joon-ho had insisted, without her asking, that the Kang Group adopt across every property it owned. She held, in her palm, the same brushed titanium keycard that had once sat in another woman's hand like proof of something it was never hers to claim. It looked identical to the one Dayoon had held up in the living room that first terrible evening, same weight, same crest, same cold shine under the lobby lights. But Amara had reprogrammed it herself, the week after the gala, so that it now carried 2 names in its encoded ledger instead of 1. Hers, listed first, as the system's root administrator and title holder of record, and beneath it, Joon-ho's, as a resident whose access existed because she had chosen, deliberately and on her own terms, to grant it. Priya had asked the only remaining question. And if he ever tries to talk someone around it again? Then he loses access before he finishes the sentence, Amara said. It was a small difference, invisible on the card. But Amara had spent her career believing that security was never defined by the lock. It was defined by who held the authority to open it and who possessed the courage to close it again. She slid the card back into her husband's palm, and for the first time since the night she'd come home to a stranger's coat on her grandmother's chair, it felt like something she was giving him, not something he'd taken for granted. Don't lose it again, she said. He didn't. And every time he reached for that card afterward, he reached for it the way a man reaches for something he has finally learned to earn, and not merely to keep.